Hello, everyone. This is Julian Teague. We'll start our webinar in a couple of minutes, if that's okay with you. We'll just wait for the numbers to build up slightly. So we'll be back in a minute or two. Thank you. Hello again. It's probably time to start now. So my name's Julian Teague. I'm really delighted to be presenting today to you our new offering, which is YouGov Consumer Journey Diagnostics. I will be co-presenting with my colleague Jake Polenacek. So he and I will be weaving in and out of this presentation and sharing it together. It should probably take about 35 minutes, the presentation, something like that. So we'll take your questions at the end. Please feel free to send questions by the chat facility. As I said, we'll respond to those questions at the end. So thank you. So we are so excited about this new product launch. Before we go into more details about YouGov Consumer Journey Diagnostics and the thinking behind what we're doing, just a small introduction to YouGov. Most of you know us well, but hopefully this information is interesting. So we are big. We have a panel of about 15 million respondents worldwide, and we're doing about, we have about 40 million survey responses that are coming in from them. We are very, very proud of the fact that we produce public data. That's surveys that we do, which are topical and of interest, which we share with our respondents and the public at large. What that means is YouGov is the most quoted research source in the world. We think that adds value for you because you're working with a very respected agency. It also adds value to our respondents because they feel that they are involved in these surveys where they see the data and they're actually helping to form public opinion, if you like. What that means is actually we have highly engaged respondents. So 75% of our respondents are coming back for multiple surveys. We're collecting lots and lots of data. That data goes into our database, which we call the Cube, which means that we can profile audiences using thousands of variables. We can also use those variables for targeting as well. We have over 2,000 clients and we've been running for 11 years. So that's us, brief introduction. Let's get into the meat of the presentation. So let's start with what every marketer knows. So we all know as marketers that there is a purchase funnel for brands. We also know that those brand relationships evolve as consumers move down that funnel. Classically, that funnel will start with awareness. It will then move into interest. In brand index terms, we would define interest as consideration or purchase intent. It will then move on to sale. And then ideally, we'll get repeat sale or we'll build longer term relationships. So we've got loyalty. We also know that in an ideal world, what you would try to do is adapt your communications to be effective at each stage of the funnel and beyond. So, stereotypically at the awareness stage, you would be doing your big kind of brand building messages, your more emotion filled messages. As you hit the sales stage, you would be having messages which were about a call to action, about bringing purchase at this stage. We also know that actually speaking to people at each stage of the consumer journey discreetly in different ways, in a well-targeted way, is difficult. Why? Well, because consumers are often unsynchronized in their consumer journey. So I might be thinking of buying a car, I might be starting the journey to buy a car, other people will be starting that journey at different times. So if I'm trying to target people who are at the consideration stage of car purchasing, for instance, there's a fair chance that any target group that we try to reach will be at different stages in that journey. It's also hard to control it. Obviously, as a brand, you try to control your communications and influence each stage, but you're working within a category. Competitors are doing things within that category. They can influence your potential consumers in their journey. Also, the category can determine the journey itself. So if I was thinking about alcoholic drinks, for instance, it may be usage occasions which are really important. So I buy champagne because I'm celebrating, I buy beer because I'm socializing, I buy single malt whiskey because I'm treating myself. So the journey is determined by the category as well as by you. The journey starts and finishes at different times, different consumers travel at different speeds, and sometimes they get totally diverted and come off it. Whilst you try to target people at each stage, again, you're trying to balance various priorities, and that can be hard. So you want to achieve reach for many mass market products, but you also want to achieve efficiency. It's hard to do them at the same time. If you're trying to control your messaging and make sure that you're giving the right messages to the right people, which is key to marketing, you may say, well, using addressable media is the answer to that. And it works really well. But doing that with reach, again, can be a hard balance. Also, we know that when people look at the consumer journey, often they look at the final stages of it. We would argue quite strongly that that's dangerous because you can look at the final stages, but there's a danger that you will attribute effects to marketing efforts that had at the and channels which you used at the final stages because they led to the sale. But actually, the brand building, the heavy loading happened way before that, sometimes before. So the brand investment is delivering over a long period of time and only does it much later. We looked at our brand index data to try and get kind of more insights on how this consumer journey is working. And very interestingly, we're seeing a pattern which keeps repeating. So along the bottom here, we've got our different audiences. So people who are aware of these 4 brands in Germany. The brands are Volkswagen, Barclaycard, H&M, and Vodafone. So we've got the aware audience, the considering audience, the purchase intent audience, so we're moving closer to the time of purchase, the current customer audience, and the former customer audience. What we're seeing is this pattern, and it keeps repeating itself across markets, across brand index categories. That at the awareness stage, the positive impression, which is the metric we're using here, is at its lowest, the net positive impression. It starts to build as consideration builds, and it kind of peaks at that purchase intent stage. People have the highest level of positive impression at that stage. Once they get over that initial excitement and they become current customers, it tends to drop. And then when they become former customers, it drops significantly. The former customer point we think is really, really important because what our data is saying is never ever ignore your ex-customers. They matter. Later, we'll be showing you some NPS data, which shows that they're highly likely to be detractors. So they don't go away. You need to keep considering them. So brand perceptions are changing as people move over the consumer journey. So we think actually the consumer journey should be at the center of your studies around brand perception and the way you look at brand perception. We've looked at some different metrics here. As I say, the pattern repeats. So again, we're looking at positive impression for those 4 brands in the UK, similar kind of pattern. We take a different metric, which is good quality, the quality metric in Germany, similar pattern across the 4 brands. And the final one is value, perceptions of the brand being good value. Again, similar pattern as you move across the 4 stages. So the consumer journey really matters. It's critical to brand understanding. And we know that, actually targeting marketing is really about reaching the right people. The consumer journey data is saying very clearly that at the right times really matters. We also know that it's about communicating the right messages. And finally, of course, it's about communicating via the right channels. And those are the very basics of marketing. This is why marketing requires great professionals such as yourselves. Over to Jake.
Thank you, Julian. So those marketing principles that Julian has just been speaking about on the previous slides, speaking to the right people at the right times with the right message and through the right channels, they also very much apply to market research. Conducting research amongst the wrong people impacts the speed with which research data can be provided back to you. And it'll also impact the cost and the value for money that you receive as a research buyer. Administering the survey to the wrong people will at best create a lot of noise in the data, and it may obscure any information which is genuinely helpful and insightful. Or at worst, it could be so wide of the mark that it makes the whole data set effectively irrelevant. There's also a knock-on impact of broad or indiscriminate sampling that we absolutely need to take into account, in that it can create disengagement amongst panelists due to them having been frequently screened out and prevented from taking part in surveys, which can then lead to disillusionment with the panelist experience and in turn leading to low quality and ill-considered responses from the panelists. Likewise, speaking to people at the wrong time can lead to misleading signals in the data. With reference to the customer journey, speaking to somebody about a different stage of the customer journey than the stage they are at in that moment, that's always going to be a hypothetical exercise. It's clearly much better to speak to people who are actually at that particular stage of the journey if you can, so they can relate their experience via the survey directly then and there. Doing that leads to less wastage of sample and data, which also leads to much more engaged respondents who will give better responses, more considered responses. Finally, applying the wrong analytics is also a risk to users of research data such as yourselves. Too often we analyze our audiences simply as demographics, when this is only part of the picture. We know that demographics aren't necessarily the sole determinants of people's attitudes or their behaviors. The underlying picture is often much more complex and nuanced and requires much deeper investigation.
We think we're in a unique position, as I say, to understand the relationships between brands and the consumer journey because of who we are, quite frankly. So we do brand index. No one does more brand tracking than us because we're running brand index in so many countries across so many brands all the time. We also do a great deal of custom brand tracking too. Because we're asking about the consumer journey at the same time, we can understand the relationship of those two areas. And again, no one's doing more consumer journey work because we're doing it continuously across the world across a range of brands and a range of sectors. Bit more detail on Brand Index. It's covering 1,900 brands. That's a lot of brands. It's covering 16 brand health metrics across 45 sectors and 45 markets. Having all that data is fantastic because what it allows you to have is context on your own brand or your own sector and understand whether movements on your own brand or to do with your sector are unusual or normal, to have the full picture of where you sit. That helps you to understand what does good look like for my brand because you've got that context. All this data goes into our database, which is called the Cube, which we're very proud of. It's called the Cube because it has 3 dimensions, and this is really unusual. So clearly it has thousands of profiling variables. It has people, that's the second dimension, but critically, it has time series data. We can plot how the data is evolving and changing over time, and we can see how it's changing at an individual respondent level too, and we can make sure that our sampling reflects where people are now. In terms of the data that goes into the Cube, clearly proprietary data, custom data, which is proprietary, which our clients have told us is confidential, doesn't go into that, I should say, first of all. We fully respect that and that data is fully protected. But if a client says you can share that, we will put it into the database. We have the profiles data, which gives us thousands of profiling variables, both behavioral variables and attitudinal variables. We have brand index data, and as I said, that all gets housed in the database. In terms of brand index, at the center of brand index, as I mentioned, is the consumer journey. And it's a very simple consumer journey, but actually it works and applies to virtually all brands. So it's that journey, that pattern of moving from awareness to consideration, to intention to purchase, to being a customer. Critically, as I say, we've got former customers there too. They really matter. They're not targeted enough, probably, because number one, of course, you want to get them back, but number two, they don't go away. And you know, if you've had a messy divorce with them, they may say things about you that you don't like, and it's important to understand what they're saying. So, you know, that's important to consider them too. Today, what we're going to be talking about is our new consumer journey diagnostics, what we are talking about already. They fall into these 5 areas. So NPS and brand attributes or brand values tracking. We've got a product concept test, creative test, loyalty and switching test, and a purchasing funnel model there. All of these modules can be asked at each stage. Over to Jake.
Yes, so at YouGov, we offer a spectrum of tools to suit almost all research requirements. As this chart shows, on one side, we have our syndicated offering, which includes Brand Index, and which, as you've heard, is our comprehensive flagship brand tracking tool, plus Destination Index, which is similar to Brand Index, focusing on the travel sector, Sports Index, which is the same thing, focusing on sports teams and sponsorship and that sort of thing. That's just to name but a few. Then, of course, we've got Profiles, which is the way that our clients can access the Cube, which, as Julian was describing, is our vast repository of demographic and attitudinal behavioral data containing hundreds of thousands of data points in those categories. At the other end, we have fully bespoke research, where our expert research consultants build studies for you from the ground up, and they'll be matching to match your specific requirements, whatever they might be. So we'd be drawing on fully customized sampling, fully customized questionnaires, and then fully bespoke reporting at the end of it, again, tailored specifically to your exact requirements. The consumer journey diagnostic modules that we're talking about now, they're templated, and so they fall in between those two. They provide detailed diagnostic information about your brand and products and services. And they're also fully linked to the YouGov cube to help you get at the why behind the data. But being templated, they also offer substantial efficiencies in both time and cost versus a fully bespoke study. Now, the sample for the consumer journey diagnostic modules, and this is the really clever thing about this product, we think, is sourced from our brand index respondents. So remember that YouGov's panel of 15 million globally is fully proprietary. So we own it fully. And that means we're also free to recontact our panelists at any time. We've also set up advanced systems which can see how our panelists have responded to all of our previous surveys. So in this case, for the diagnostic modules, the samples sourced from those who've recently completed a brand index survey, which then has the added benefit that we can link their responses from the module questionnaires with their responses to brand index, which then provides a very detailed brand-led analysis. There's two main sampling options that we're providing with these modules. So the first is a brand focus, where we focus recruitment on up to 3 brands of your choosing. And the second is a sector focus, which looks at the overall sector. It will be a specific sector, but it looks at the overall sector. So not brand specific, but sector specific. Now, within these two options, per the slides earlier in the presentation, we can also hone in on consumers who are at a particular stage of the customer journey. And this we feel is a unique capability. So for example, we can target those who are aware of a brand, those who would consider a brand. They'd say they intend to purchase it. They have purchased it, so they're customers, or those that have moved away from the brand. You know, they're the former customers of the brand, which is also very, very important and not to be neglected as a group. As I say, we know who these people are from the outset based on their responses to previous surveys, so that we can recruit fully representative samples among these groups without needing to free find. Which, as you can imagine, creates a great deal of efficiency in terms of time and cost in the process. So once we've identified a sample, we administer the survey using our in-house systems. We collect the data, and then we also weight it to the representative profile for that sample group to ensure that the final data set is fully robust. Now, the modules are designed with flexibility and responsiveness in mind. They can be set up to run at any frequency, sample feasibility permitting. And that also incorporates a 6-month lockout period to prevent any over-contacting specific respondents and potential contamination of data sets, as is standard in any good piece of research. The modules, I mean, for example, the modules can be commissioned on an ad hoc basis at irregular intervals to perhaps fit around a specific campaign or product launch, or you can set them up to run at regular intervals. If you want to track the data metrics over time, that can be either monthly or quarterly or bi-monthly, really whatever your requirement is. Again, feasibility permitting, sample availability permitting. The data is then made available to you in Crunch, which is YouGov's interactive data interrogation platform. It's very easy to use, and it lets you or anyone else in your organization to view and slice and dice the data as you wish. The information is presented in a nice, clean dashboard at the top level, but you can go deeper into that dashboard and really cut that data and analyze it any which way that you need to. It's also connected to brand index data, which allows direct respondent level linkage of the module data with the brand tracking information for a great deal of additional context. We can also connect profiles data, which vastly expands the analytical possibilities again, and it allows you to explore links and gain insight across the huge number of variables, hundreds of thousands of variables that exist within profiles and the cube, and you can cross those against the information within the modules as well. Okay, so now we're going to take you through the survey content for each of the diagnostic modules to give you a top-line view of what's covered in each one. So Julian, back over to you for the first one.
Thank you, Jake. So we have a specific module that focuses on the purchase funnel itself and asks detailed questions about people's individual purchase funnels for brands. Our thinking behind it, we tend to take the view that when you're thinking about the purchase funnel or the consumer journey, you should take the long view, because it often starts very early, especially for big established brands. So we need to understand how that marketing activity has been contributing to the final purchase decision over a long period of time, not just at the final stages. We also take the view, and here we're influenced by Byron Sharp, that the category matters as much as the brand relationship. So you really need to understand the usage occasions. I gave an example of alcoholic drinks earlier. You know, it could be clothes. You know, I buy a new shirt because I'm going to a party or whatever. There is a occasion which is driving it, which is category driven as much as it's brand driven. So marketers need to understand those usage occasions. They also clearly need to understand what happens at the time of purchase, at the buying points. So we also look at the platforms which are used for buying and at those final stages of the decision making. Finally, brands clearly need to have share of mind. So in markets which are extremely cluttered, where there are lots of brands competing, in order for the brand to stand out on the supermarket shelf, for instance, that brand needs to have share of mind. So we try and explore some of the attributes which make the brand potent or strong and make it stand out. So here's an example. We did a pilot of this study on quick serve restaurants in Australia, this was, and we're looking at McDonald's specifically. So to test that thesis, that really to understand the consumer journey, you need to go way back and understand what was happening earlier on in people's lives and whether the brand had entered at that point. If we look at McDonald's, we can see 37% are saying they grew up with McDonald's, 38% are saying, I can't remember where I first heard about McDonald's, but I've been aware of it for a long time. So that consumer journey happened over a long period. That brand investment has to happen over a long period in order to pay off. In order to understand the category behavior, we've then asked about reasons for purchase within the quick serve restaurant area. And, you know, big reasons are because I buy it for special occasions, I buy it because it's a treat. Finally, to understand the role of brand in that purchase decision making, we've got two statements here. So first of all, if I close my eyes, I can imagine the McDonald's logo. A whopping great 77% are agreeing with that, which shows the strength of that brand. And 52% are saying, I love McDonald's. So, you know, that's a clear differentiator when people are deciding which quick serve restaurant they're going to go to. So in terms of those questions, as I mentioned earlier, we've got those category entry metrics. So frequency of purchasing within the category, reasons for purchasing within the category, how found out which brands to buy. We've then got those brand metrics and brand usage metrics. But very importantly, we've got those brand user statements, which are about the attributes that people are associating with the brand. Moving on to our next study, this is really much more of a brand study, a pure brand study, but also including NPS and customer experience metrics there too. You could commission this study just to be an NPS study if you wanted to, and try and understand which customer experience metrics and brand attributes are driving those NPS scores. It works really well that way. Alternatively, if you think that NPS is just another metric, you could approach it as a brand study. And again, it's a good brand study. So in terms of the NPS context, we believe that the drivers are a combination of customer experience and brand strength or brand health metrics. So we come at it from both of those angles. We try to cover the well-known key drivers of brand strength. And we've also tried to focus on those increasingly important drivers of brand strength, which are linked to corporate social responsibility and ESG, environmental social governance. We know that those things have become more important topics over the last year or so, that companies and brands are being held accountable for them. So we've thrown them into the mix. We think they matter. This chart here, it's a UK-based chart, so I'll interpret this for you. We've done a key driver analysis, and we've looked at a metric which is about brand love and another metric which is about brand trust. And on the horizontal axis, we've done a key driver analysis where we've looked at the importance of those metrics for each brand in terms of driving high NPS scores. Now, what we can see is for most brands, and we've got a range of brands there, so Waitrose is a supermarket, British Airways is an airline, Jet2.com is an airline, Lidl's another supermarket. For most of those brands, in terms of predicting a high NPS score, driving a high NPS score, the love metric is most important. We're finding that trust, and we're not saying that trust doesn't matter, we're saying that trust is less important in terms of driving recommendation. Maybe trust is just a basic health feature for a brand. It's not what people recommend on the basis of. Trust is less important for virtually all brands. However, in terms of the airlines, it's coming out significantly more important compared with the other brands. So Jet2.com and British Airways. It's also coming out strongly for Lidl. So Lidl is a very value-based proposition. It's quite a strong price proposition. Waitrose is a very values-based proposition. So it's based on ethics and so on. So when the proposition is more value-based, you know, it needs to do what it says on the tin. Trust is coming through. When it's values-based, that love thing is more important. The vertical axis is just showing the scores. So if people on average scored strongly agree, they would give a 5, strongly disagree, they would give a 1. What we can see is virtually all our brands are actually doing pretty well against those metrics, most of the time, with the exception of Huawei there on trust. They're coming above the mid point of 3. So the things that we're covering there, we're covering brand usage, purchase ownership, NPS, tenure, so how long they've been with the brand and cadence of usage, customer experience, so what touch points have they had contact with the brand with recently, and what was their satisfaction. We've then got these metrics. So we've got brand sensing presence. So some people would call that brand fame, that feeling that the brand is big, brand connection, brand conviction, brand trust, emotion, tribalism, that feeling that you are a member of a club because you buy this brand, and brand nationalism. So something that we've seen across the world over the last few years is rising nationalism. So we're asking, does that impact on people's brand decisions? So in the UK, we would have a statement like, this is a very British brand. In the US, this is a very American brand, and so on. Over to Jake.
Thank you, Julian. Right, so the next module we'd like to show you is the creative test module. So we all know that when it comes to developing a new creative, testing the effectiveness of the creative prior to or during launch is very important. A creative that misfires can be ineffective, it can be costly, and it may even be damaging to a brand upon release, and therefore entirely counterproductive. Our creative test module allows the testing of different messaging for different stages of the customer journey, as we've outlined, with the flexibility that our sampling approach, our sampling methodology offers. And by linking with brand index data, it also allows a comparison of exposed versus non-exposed respondents to really understand how people are reacting to the new creative. So as this summary of the creative test model questionnaire content shows, so we first established the spontaneous and prompted brand awareness and also ad awareness. And then following exposure to the creative, we show the creative in the survey, and that can be any creative medium, whether that's TV or print or outdoor advertising. We can show that whatever the format, and so we establish ad recognition if it's an existing ad that's already been launched. We then look at spontaneous and prompted brand recall from the creative. So to what extent is the creative communicating your brand? The recall of the messaging as well. So to what extent is it communicating the desired messaging? Like what's the cut through of that particular messaging? What is it that people are recalling as being the key messages communicated by the creative? We then look at likability, the brand attributes that are communicated by the creative. What is it about your brand that people are taking out from this particular creative? And then also statements describing the ad itself, so further diagnostic information about the way that people are perceiving the advertisement itself. Then a call to action response so what are people going to do, or what have they done as a result of seeing the ad if they've already seen it. And then finally, we look at post-exposure brand consideration, brand positivity, and also likelihood of using the brand in future, having now seen the creative, how to what extent have these things changed following exposure to the creative. All right, our next module addresses loyalty and switching. So consumers are constantly evaluating their relationships with brands. That might be who they would consider buying from, who they actually go on to buy from, and then whether they decide to stay with a brand as customers, or whether they choose to then move to another brand for whatever reason. So it's crucial for any consumer-facing organization to retain its hard-won customers, which also means then understanding threats posed by competitors and quantifying the likely loyalty or promiscuity of various parts of its customer base. So to answer these points, the loyalty and the switching module is designed to provide a comprehensive end-to-end churn analysis. So it looks at the current brand usage and strength of that relationship with the brand. It looks at satisfaction overall and satisfaction with various aspects of what it is that the brand delivers. And it also looks at NPS as well. It then looks at the brand that they previously used before the current brand, and the reasons for switching away from them. So what is it that their last brand did to prompt them to move away from them and choose the brand that they're currently using? It then examines the other brands that people considered when shopping around. So, what is the consideration set? And the reasons that they ultimately decided to select the brand that they did. What were the various attributes of the other brand, but what was the main attribute that really elevated their current brand above the rest and prompted them to choose that particular brand? And then it looks at the loyalty to the current brand by understanding whether the customers intend to switch away, and if they do, the reasons for doing so. And then who would also be in the consideration set when they do, and what it is that the other providers offer that might tempt them away. So, for example, in a recent pilot, Julian, are you able to move the slides on? Thank you. Looking at the mobile phone network, again in Australia, as one of the countries where we piloted these. So we saw that 53% have actually switched provider in the last 10 years, and 59% of those were NPS detractors, which to the point that Julian was making on the previous slides about the importance of the NPS metric and the importance of looking at your former customers. It underlines in terms of this churn analysis how important it is to keep customers happy. The key reasons for switching were cheaper tariffs being available elsewhere, better value tariffs, so that's consumers getting more features and add-ons for their money, and tariffs providing a better match with consumer needs in terms of the amount of minutes and data, which itself speaks to the need to test product packages to ensure that they resonate with the target market. finally, it says that 21% are likely to switch in the next 2 years, which indicates a promiscuous consumer base that companies will really need to work hard at to retain. All right, the last of our consumer diagnostic modules is the product concept test. So as with creative testing, product testing prior to launch can help save enormous amounts of money and time just by ensuring that the final product resonates with consumers positively and in the intended way, as well as providing diagnostic input, which may help you shape and refine the concept. It can also, of course, provide an external view of the product concept, which is independent of any internal views, which may have been influenced by the cumulative investments made in terms of time and money in the development of the product so far. The way this module questionnaire is structured is described here. So it starts with an overview of the concept appeal. So we introduce the concept, the likelihood to purchase based on what the respondent is seeing, the likely frequency of usage, and the reasons for usage versus their current products. It then looks at a number of evaluative measures, including the extent to which the new product solves a problem or it fulfills a need, its believability, can people actually see this product? Is it credible? Or is it perhaps sort of stretching credibility? Is it overstating its usefulness or its appeal? Its newness and its relevance to the consumer as well. Is it fulfilling a need? Is it really relevant to the consumer? Is it really something new, or is it just a Me Too product and it'll join simply be one of many other similar products? And also the value for money based on a specific price point, if you have one in mind at that point. And finally, the questionnaire examines the extent to which the product fits with a brand and how it might then also impact consumer perception of the brand offering it. And then a diagnostic evaluation of the product in the context of the category in which it's offered. For example, that might be taste. If it's a food or drink item, it could be practicality or durability. If it's a white good or some form of tech, it could literally be anything. And these statements will obviously differ depending on the product and the category, and we'll work closely with you to determine appropriate statements for that particular product and sector. So altogether, it provides an actionable and insightful evaluation of the product, which would help to either validate the product design as it stands, or it would provide diagnostic input to aid in any further refinement necessary of the concept prior to its launch. So with that, Julian, back to you for the final couple of slides.
Thank you, Jake. So we are so excited that we're launching in the US now. It's amazing. We would love to discuss this with you. We're also launching in other markets, so in the UK, Germany and France, in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and UAE, and in APAC, Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, Australia, India. They're the markets that we're doing now. We'll then roll it out to the rest of the world. However, if there are any markets which we're not covering at present, which are really important to you, please do contact us and we can reprioritize around your needs. So to summarize, we believe that brand audiences are highly dynamic. So we love segmentations, we love static segmentations, we love to profile audiences, and we do that on a custom level, but we also do it with our rich profiles database. We also believe that it makes sense to look at how your audiences change, how they change their minds, their buying habits, their thoughts, their opinions, because people do change. So brand audiences are highly dynamic. Take the static view, but also look at them over time, because who they are and what they think constantly changes. We believe the consumer journey is key to that. And we believe that as market research people, we need to learn from our clients, you marketers, and we've actively taken many of the learnings that we've had via working with you and built that into our market research approaches. So more than ever, market research is about asking the right questions, not the right messages, the right questions in our case, to the right people. And key to this, you need to do it at the right times, and we can help with that. So any questions from anyone? I think we're finished slightly ahead of time, which is good. So we can take questions now on chat, or you can contact me or Jake, or you can contact your usual YouGov contacts, and they will be really pleased to help you. But I'm very happy to take any questions now if you have any. Do it via the chat facility. So the good news is I am assuming that no questions means that the presentation was clear. So thank you. And we look forward to working with you. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Many thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.